Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's October 1st, 2025. We are in the New Testament book of Luke, and we are going to read from chapter 22:47 to 23:25 today. All right, so let me get to the right page. So we're going to start with the betrayal. Judas leads a band of temple guards, I guess is one way to think of them, to take Jesus in the garden, betrays him with a kiss, which Jesus calls him out and says, "Hey, really, you're going to betray me with a kiss?" And then he calls out the temple guards and says, "Man, I was in the temple every day and you guys did nothing. Why are you sneaking up here in the middle of the night to get me?" We see that error of the disciples. Okay, when we said that the disciples essentially, they have their own mental image of who the Messiah is and what's going to happen, and we have what Jesus is actually going to do as the Messiah. And this is where it kind of comes to a head, because as they're taken, they whip out their swords, and it's like, aha, this is the moment we've been waiting for. We're going to throw all that turn the other cheek stuff out the window, and we're going to fight to the death here. And Jesus stops them and says, "No, they're going to arrest me, they're going to beat me, and they're going to kill me." And the disciples' minds are blown. They can no longer reconcile what they think and what's going to happen, because what happens. Now, to the disciples' credit, we see later on and in Acts that they've come to understand that, hey, we got to give up what we believe and believe what Jesus actually did. But we kind of get that in a nutshell with Peter and his denial. Okay, again, his world has been flipped upside down. He doesn't know what's going on. So it's not that he's denying Jesus is Christ, or is denying that he doesn't believe in him anymore. It's that he's now no longer sure what's going on. And as they're saying, "Hey, aren't you one of them?" He's like, I don't know how to answer that anymore. So he just says, "I don't know who Jesus is." And he ends up shamed over that when he realizes, you know what, Jesus was right. He told me I would deny him 3 times, and I said no, and I did it. I didn't think I would ever do that. And I did it to save my own skin. And he's brought as low as we can go. So the greatest, Peter, man number 1 next to Jesus, becomes the lowest person in the world as far as Peter is concerned. Now, Luke differs from Mark. Mark tells us that Jesus is brought in and he gets kind of a kangaroo trial. But that was done on the secret. That was not something that the Sanhedrin could do. You're not supposed to judge someone in the middle of the night. You're not supposed to punish them already for a crime that you haven't really officially accused them of. But Luke is a reporter. Luke is trying to give us verifiable facts, so he can't give us what Peter says, because there's no one else that would really back that up. But he gives us a different way, because the first time we see Jesus after his arrest is when they're bringing him to the Sanhedrin, and he's already been beaten up and roughed up. So that would be a signal right there that, hey, something is not right here, because that should not have happened before he's ever been charged with anything. So we already know that he's not getting a fair trial. And then we actually get the trial, and we see that Jesus doesn't really answer anything, which is similar to Mark. We want to see that when they accuse him of calling himself the Son of God, that is a divine title that belongs to God. Jesus' response is essentially, we're using the New King James Version, if you've got some other versions like an NIV or NLT or ESV, compare what's said. And what we want to see isn't that Jesus essentially denies them or anything like that. What Jesus is essentially telling them is, hey, you know what? You know I am. And that's his defense. Are you really the Son of God? You guys know that I am. And that drives him crazy. What further testimony do we need? We've heard it out of his own mouth. And it's like, hey, you know what? You knew it in your heart, but you don't want to accept it. You want to punish him instead. You want to do like those evil vine dressers when they saw the hair. Hey, if we kill him, then we can claim it all for ourselves. they hand him over to Pontius Pilate. Again, Pontius Pilate kind of worms his way out of it, says, well, Herod's here, we'll let Herod decide. And there's nothing in the Roman law that Jesus is guilty of that would require the death penalty. And the Romans exercise authority over who can be put to death. But the Jews persist. And then essentially Pilate says, okay, well, you know what? If that's what you're going to, if it's coming down to doing justice for Jesus or these Jews going crazy, I don't want the Jews to go crazy. Crucify him. Just take him away and crucify him. And we get the story of Barabbas. And that idea of, hey, you know what? I can spare somebody. Should I spare Jesus? And they say, no, spare this murderer. But Jesus didn't do anything. This guy actually murdered your people you know. Well, we want the murderer instead. And that's where this section is going to end. So let's go ahead. We're going to read Luke chapter 22, verse 47 to 23:25. And while he was still speaking, behold, a multitude, and he who was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? When those around him saw what was going to happen, they said to him, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus answered and said, permit even this. And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, captains of the temple, and the elders who had come to him, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you daily in the temple, you did not try to seize me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness. Having arrested him, they led him and brought him into the high priest's house, but Peter followed at a distance. Now when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them, and a certain servant girl, seeing him as he sat by the fire, looked intently at him and said, this man was also with him. But he denied him, saying, woman, I do not know him. And after a little while another saw him and said, you also are of them. Peter said, man, I am not. Then after about an hour had passed, another confidently affirmed, saying, surely this fellow also was with him, for he is a Galilean. But Peter said, man, I do not know what you are saying. Immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So Peter went out, and he wept bitterly. Now the men who had held Jesus mocked him and beat him, and having blindfolded him, they struck him on the face and asked him, saying, prophesy, who is the one who struck you? And many other things they blasphemingly spoke against him. As soon as it was day, the elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, came together and led him into their council, saying, if you are the Christ, tell us. But he said to them, if I tell you, you will by no means believe, and if I also ask you, you will by no means answer me or let me go. Hereafter the Son of Man will sit on the right hand of the power of God. Then they all said, are you then the Son of God? So he said to them, you rightly say that I am. And they said, what further testimony do we need? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth. Then the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation, and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the King. And Pilate asked him, saying, are you the king of the Jews? He answered him and said, it is as you say. So Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, I find no fault in this man. But they were more fierce, saying, he stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked if the man was a Galilean, and as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. Now when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracle done by him. Then he questioned him with many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. Then Herod with his men of war treated him with contempt and mocked him, arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him back to Pilate. That very day Pilate and Herod became friends with each other, for previously they had been at enmity. They were enemies with each other. Then Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, said to them, you have brought this man to me as one who misleads the people. And indeed, having examined him in your presence, I have found no fault in this man concerning those things of which you accuse him. No, neither did Herod, for I sent you back to him, and indeed nothing deserving of death has been done by him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. For it was necessary for him to release one to them at the feast. And they all cried out at once, saying, "Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas," who had been thrown into prison for a certain rebellion made in the city, and for murder. Pilate, therefore, wishing to release Jesus, again called out to them, but they shouted, saying, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Then he said to them the third time, "Why, what evil has he done? I have found no reason for death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go." But they were insistent, demanding with loud voices that he be crucified. And the voices of these men and of the chief priests prevailed. So Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they requested. And he released to them the one they requested, who for rebellion and murder had been thrown into prison. But he delivered Jesus to their will. Excuse me. May God bless the reading of his will. May God bless you. Bye.